How's it going, everybody? I'd like to welcome you guys to the next episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast. I have a special guest this time, Trent Cotton, who actually just released a book. And we're going to talk about his book. We're going to talk about a little bit about his background. And one of the reasons why I'm excited about you guys getting a chance to listen to Trent today is he's actually been able to take the agile method, something that we always talk about, we recruit on, we support as recruiters, and take it successfully to the recruiting industry. So let's go ahead and get started, Trent.
Hey, hey, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good, man. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, good morning. I think we're talking on a Friday, so there's light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully it's not a train.
So, let's get started. You actually, you just wrote a book. You just got a brand new job. Everything going on at once.
And throw into that, I'm going to be moving personally. Let's see, maybe next month or the following month. So, I don't like to do things one at a time. I like to, let's just kind of rip the Band-Aid off, do it all at one time. So, I don't know if that is a sign of insanity or just a sign that I like to take on big projects and get them out of the way.
Let's go with big projects.
Sounds better. Definitely sounds better on a resume.
So where do we want to jump in first?
Well, I'll just do a brief bio and then we'll kind of jump into the fun stuff because I want to spend more time talking about the topic that I'm passionate about. So just quick bio of me. Started out as a banker, put myself through college, did sales leadership, did all forms of lending from personal to retail to managing retail, private banking, and then was managing 4 states for a mortgage company. And I just, I think everybody kind of reaches that point of going, okay, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? And I loved what I did, but I wanted to see if there was something else out there. And so I took a pivot in my career and took a contract recruiting position for a bank and spent probably the first 6 months having a whole bunch of HR people say, you'll never make it, you'll never make it. But the difference was that I could speak the lingo. I knew the business. And at the end of the day, all of us can agree that recruiting is a sales function. You identify prospects, you manage your pipeline, you manage your portfolio, and then you deliver and execute on the needs of your client. And if you do all of that well, then you'll be successful. So that competency transferred over into recruiting, and that was 2004. So I've done recruiting, I've done HR management, I've done HR consulting. I had my own gig for about 2 years and joined a bank, a BBVA, in 2010, worked there for 10 years and was the director of talent acquisition up until 2 weeks ago and accepted a new role as the VP or director of talent acquisition, talent strategies and retention, and employer branding for a company called Bureau Veritas. And so I've gone from banking to a completely new industry that is far-reaching. It's been kind of exciting over the last 2 weeks, learning everything that we do. And so if it can be tested, inspected, or certified, Bureau Veritas has got its hands in it.
Okay.
And we are, my team, we are responsible for going out there and finding the talent. So that's just kind of as brief of a bio as I can get it. Because if you look at my LinkedIn, it looks a little schizophrenic until I can actually explain. There's actually logic in all these moves.
Phenomenal. And real quick, I want to kind of ping in one of the things that we're going to be talking about, like the agile method with recruiting. If you're, whatever you're doing, internal, external, if you're looking at growing the corporate ladder internally, I think this is a great way to do this. Am I right in saying that?
It is. It's and I guess I'm having a little bit of a flashback, starting a new company because previously we started this, I believe, in 2018. So I have been 2 years in this agile methodology or agile related recruiting. We call it sprint recruiting. And everything just kind of moves at a beat, at a cadence. And then I come back into what I call traditional recruiting, and we're going, oh dear God in heaven, we have got. It's like PTSD for me. I can't do that. So, but it kind of reminded me why sprint recruiting works. And I'm not saying that just because it's something that I developed. I'm saying it because there are some success factors in there that makes life balanced for the recruiter. So the first thing that I think we probably need to cover is what are the 4 pitfalls of normal recruiting, all right? And they're very easy. I think, everybody will be nodding their head as I go over them. So the first one is that everything's a priority, which by definition means that nothing is a priority, all right? I call it the chicken little. Everyone's running around. Nothing's really getting done. Your focus is shifted from this priority to this priority to this priority. And there's no semblance of what did I accomplish at the end of the day. And then the second is that there's like a lack of rhythm. I'm a musician. I love having a drummer because if the drummer keeps the beat, you can have 42 different instrumentalists up there playing. All of us are going to lock into what that beat is. In normal recruiting, there's no beat. It's kind of like the scene from Lucille Ball where she's just stuffing chocolate everywhere she possibly can, and that belt just gets faster and faster and faster. And whenever I think about traditional recruiting, that's the image that comes to mind. So that's the second issue. The third issue is that no matter how hard we try, a lot of times we're out of line or out of touch with our client and what's driving those business needs. So, especially in corporate recruiting, we'll be filling all these jobs, trying to get the low-hanging fruit and get some activity out there. But then whenever you talk to the client, they're like, you're not meeting our need. And there's just this real strong sense of, okay, well, what is your need and how do I meet it? And that actually leads into the last issue, which is that the feedback loop is broken. Usually there's an SLA, but it's only on the recruiting side. It's not on the manager side. And so when we were working through and developing sprint recruiting, we came up with 4 principles to combat the 4 pitfalls. So let's talk with the first one. It's kind of easy. It's in the name. It's the sprint. What we do is rather than looking at how am I going to move the needle on 42 different positions, you look at how am I going to move the needle over 2 weeks. And so what it does is it kind of compresses the focus. It compresses the ability to be able to measure success. And I'll always give the example of taking my nieces. They were 4 or 5 at the time, twins, and took them to the cereal aisle. And I was pressed for time. I was like, all right, girls, pick a cereal. And it's, well, I want this one. I want this one. I mean, it was 5 minutes of deliberation. And I learned the next time. I told them we were coming around the corner on the cereal aisle, and I said, okay, you have 4 options. You want Cocoa Pebbles, Cocoa Puffs, Frosted Mini Wheats, or Cheerios. And once I gave them those 4, they were immediately able to lock in and say, this is the one that I want. And Sprint works a lot the same way. But it works hand in hand with the second principle, which is that the business drives the priority. So every 2 weeks, imagine sitting down with maybe if you're in corporate recruiting, the department manager or the senior executive and saying, of your 42 roles, I'm going to give you 100 points or 200 points. Whenever I'm introducing this to new managers, I say $200 of my time over the next 2 weeks, where do you want to spend it? What roles? And so you get them to allocate points or dollars to each of those different roles. And so you may have that. Yeah. So you may have that 40, but then now rather than 40 over the next 2 weeks, you're only going to work on filling these 7 that your client is saying is the most critical for their business, for them to be able to meet their profit goals. The third one is work in progress limits. So think of this as like a stopgap. You've got your time frame compressed to 2 weeks. You have your priority, so you can work on your 50-pointer, your 40. I mean, just work down the line. Makes it very easy for the recruiter to manage their dashboard. But then it comes to the next step: is how many candidates do we have in play in each one of those different steps? So if I'm working on my highest priority role, I'm essentially looking at 3 different recruiting lanes. All right, we have the recruiter source and interview. We have the hiring manager submitted for review. So I've interviewed, I've given my notes. I want the manager to give me feedback. And then of course that last lane is the hiring manager interview. What I've found in traditional recruiting is the manager sometimes is over-analysis paralysis or fear of missing out, whatever little lingo you want to use, but you'll spend just countless hours sending them, 20, 30, 50 candidates only to find that they go back and hire one of the 5 that you submitted in the beginning, right?
If that person's even still there.
Yeah, right. And then you run the risk of going, okay, your number 1 and number 2 already accepted another job because we've been working on this for 6 months. What about 3 and 4? So to help that, that's where the WIP limits come in. So as I have my priority, I'm going to next look into my swim lanes. And what I want to do is I want to have a max of 5, 5, and 5. So 5 sitting in front of the manager's scheduled interview, 5 sitting with the manager waiting on them to give us some feedback, and then maybe 5 in my back pocket that I've identified that I'm just going to kind of screen just as a good measure. So if I'm looking at my 50-pointer and I look across going kind of right to left, so right being that hiring manager interview, I've got 5 interviews scheduled with them. I've got 3 that I'm waiting on feedback from them, and then I've got another 3 that I've got interviews scheduled. In essence, I feel okay. I'm going to move on to the next one in priority, because now I'm waiting on the 4th principle, which is feedback. And in sprint recruiting, and it's been kind of fun last week and this week as I'm training new divisions, the recruiters and the hiring managers. And I always end it say, please understand, in sprint recruiting, no one can hide. So managers, if you're not giving us feedback in that 48-hour SLA that we agree to, the report's going to show it. Recruiters, if you're not giving enough qualified candidates to kind of get that funnel going, it's going to show it. So this whole being a leader of a daycare versus a talent organization, those days are gone. We look at the data and what does the data tell us? So if I schedule an interview, with you, Benjamin, and you've got 5, let's say I have them all scheduled for today. I'm going to make a note to myself that Tuesday morning, you're my highest priority manager. You have 50 points on your job. I'm going to schedule maybe a 15-minute call with you on Tuesday preemptively to go ahead and gather that feedback. If you go through those 5 and let's say 2 of them really, really rocked your world, the other 3, not so much. That's where we have the conversation. Okay, do you feel good enough that one of these 2 can make it to the final? If not, I'm going to go back to my next swim lane and say, let's look at the ones that I've already sent you, and I can book you some additional interviews. But you're going to be back at your 5, and I'm going to be waiting on feedback, and then I'm going to go to the next one in priority. So think of it as traditional recruiting. Like I said, I'm a musician. So traditional recruiting is kind of like leading a child's symphony. All of them have an instrument, all of them are playing. It's just like mass chaos. And the only people that music sounds beautiful to is the parents. But those of us that are actually trained, it sounds awful. Now take that same group and give them some guidance, give them a beat, kind of give them some sheet music, give them feedback, and then you can have them sounding like a grand orchestra. And that to me is the best example or metaphor of traditional recruiting versus the sprint recruiting model. So the thing that I like is not just that, but I'm a data nerd. I have a rule, whatever team I'm on, in God we trust, everyone else must bring data, and that's from William Denning. And so now that you have something to actually measure success, so you have the points that your client is saying, this is critical to the business, at the end of 2 weeks, you can do a bar and line graph. So the bar graph is the number of points that were budgeted. In this case, it'd be 250 versus how many we actually close. Maybe it's 100, maybe it's 50. And so now we can actually look at that graph and have meaningful conversations with our client. We're not talking about time to fill. We're not talking about the number of open positions. We're talking about what worked and what didn't in that 2-week time frame. And some of the things that we found just in beta, I think probably a month into trying this new idea, one of the lines of business that I supported at the bank, I kind of downloaded some information out of our ATS and charted the candidate journey. So how long did it take from the time a candidate applied to the time they got some kind of a decision, whether it be positive or negative? The average, and this is one of the few times in my data nerd career that the bottlenecks were there were huge bar graphs. And believe it or not, it wasn't on the recruiting, it was on the manager giving us feedback. We submit a candidate to get some kind of review on it. It was 10, 15 days.
I believe that.
Yeah. And then on the back end, like what blew my mind is on the back end, it was like 3 weeks. And the client said, you're not filling our jobs quick enough. Well, no, we're not. You're not giving us the damn feedback we need to be able to, fix the strategy.
Man, like my many years of internal work, even like externally, like, the time to fill and everything, but like internal, I'm like, this full scope poly person, it took me forever to find them. And now you just sat on them for like a month and we lost them to 3 other companies.
Oh, but you know what's so surprising to me? And I really have to control my mouth when they go, oh, well, we lost the candidate? Yeah, it's been 90 days. It's been 90 days. Why would we not lose them? They were probably not looking for a job until I got them interested. And then they go, I wonder what else is out there since, it's like ghosting people. I just,
in the next meeting, you're like, recruiting hasn't got us anybody yet. I'm like,
yeah. But now with Sprint, we've got the data.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so in our beta, the average time that we tracked for pre-Sprint was 67 days in the candidate journey. By the third iteration, 6 weeks in, we dropped it to 42. And then 2 weeks later, we dropped it to 27. And I mean, I ran the numbers back and forth, and I was like, this can't be right. This cannot be right. And as we started implementing it throughout the firm, we noticed that within probably the second sprint, we started lowering the time to fill by 25%. And while we're talking about time to fill, it's always interesting to me whenever I'm talking to TA practitioners, and they go, well, what's your time to fill? I'm like, I don't know. And I say it because I love watching. It's almost like their face becomes a TV with static on it. There's like a picture and a sound, but you can't make it out. They're like processing. And once we started like really getting into this and locking this methodology down, time to fill became, we reported it, of course, because at the time, our global office wanted it. But the conversation changed. It went from, rather than this one's been open for 90 days to this one has been in 3 different sprints and we're not getting it filled. So what is the issue? We changed the conversation.
That's good. That's great.
But we didn't change it to what we wanted to talk about. We were letting the business drive that priority, and all the stats and everything. We were talking the same exact language. I'm a little passionate about it, if you can tell. I cannot wait to, we're already doing some beta at BB, and doing some training and with the managers and with the recruiters. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to get y'all to the other side. There's balance on the other side. So it's kind of exciting.
Outside the book, and outside like following you on LinkedIn, as a leader or a future leader within a TA organization, like how do you actually get this, sprint recruiting process started?
What I find is if you're always going to have those clients that are open-minded, right? They want to try something new. And especially if you're not able, if both of you, your hiring partner and you agree this is just not working. If they're willing to try something, do a beta with them. And you can go to sprintrecruiting.com, which is my blog. I kind of write out some of the high levels. Of course, you can order the book. And in the book, I go through kind of step by step. What do we do? And I share our blunders. There were a couple of times that it's almost like we saw the pothole, and rather than going around it, we just dove right in it, but we learned. And, in the book, I kind of open it and say, I want you to learn from our mistakes so you can execute this and develop the methodology for your particular firm. So if I were a new recruiter or even a seasoned recruiter, not a leader, I would work with my partner and go, hey, can we try this? Let's just see how it works. And then start tracking your success and creating that meeting cadence. So the daily stand-ups, the bi-weekly meeting with your client where you review the previous 2 weeks and then you allocate time and priority for the following 2 weeks. And once you start tracking that success and your partner starts seeing that, at 3 o'clock on a Friday, you can leave because you were 68% of your sprint and all you're doing is waiting on your manager, you can actually unplug your phone and unplug your computer and go and relax. It's amazing. I mean, there were a couple of times that, and I'll have to brag on, my previous team. I pulled the numbers for one region, beginning of this year, and I took the last 2 weeks of 2020 off. And this particular region, this time last year, was running at 130 open positions. Whenever I pulled it in January, there were 37 open jobs.
Oh wow.
So I thought something was wrong with my query out of the ATS. It looked like something's wrong. And so I called, and it's there were 2 recruiters. And so I scheduled a meeting with them. I said, hey, what's going on? Why is this stuff not showing up? They go, no, we've only got 37 open jobs. I said, whenever I went on vacation, you guys had 68. And not only did they cut it in half in 2 weeks, they were also ahead of the sprint. So of those 37, half of them had, we were waiting on the managers. They had 7 offers out, and then they were trying to kind of lock in on 3 different offer details. So, I mean, they're sitting, beginning of the, I mean, it was mind-boggling to me because I swear mathematically I'm going, something's wrong. That's exactly, but that's what happens whenever the client and the recruiter, their priorities are locked in step, and they become hiring partners. I mean, it's relatively easy.
That is awesome. And definitely as a leader, right? When your team is like taking charge like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I would, in the beginning, of course, it's a mind bend. It is a mind bend. I mean, I created the methodology, and there are still times that I would slip into traditional recruiting, and I'm going, wait, where's my priority? You know, I have to go back to the 4 principles. So whenever we would roll it out, I would definitely be there kind of the first 3 or 4 sprints to kind of help get everybody trained about how the meetings go. And also too, imagine this biweekly allocation retrospective call that I'm talking about. Imagine having 13 senior leaders, all with major districts, on the phone. We go over what happened, what worked, what didn't over the last sprint for both the recruiters and the client. We put the fish on the table, we talk about it. Anything that's major, we take offline in terms of this, we can't really solve this in 30 minutes. But then we go through the allocation, and the recruiters can push back and say, hey, you know, you're giving 50 points to this role, and you know the person's out on vacation, or the manager's out on vacation for the next 2 weeks. Why don't you move those 50 points somewhere else? You know, but it gives the recruiters a voice, and a lot of times, sometimes the leaders go, you know what, I totally forgot about that. So the recruiters have an opportunity to be able to help define what the success is going to look like. But then, you know, you get off the phone and you know what your priorities are, and I cannot tell you how easy it is to have 13 people on the call. And usually we would get off, I think the longest one, once we kind of hit our stride, the longest one was 27 minutes. A lot of times we get in and out in 10 or 15 minutes, and everybody knows what they're supposed to do, and then they go and execute.
Clarity.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. What's really great is we had one line of business who had, I think, 7 execs underneath him. And they had, let's just say, 500 points among them. And we had one division that was high net worth, so high revenue per FTE. And they had 6 or 7 openings, but among the rest of them, there were like 20, 25. We're on the phone as recruiters. They're talking as partners and saying, hey, John, who's running the high net worth, it makes more sense for the company and the organization for you to get your stuff filled over the next 2 weeks, because if not, we're not going to hit our revenue goal. So, you know, one by one, they succeeded their points to John. And that 2-week sprint, that recruiter was only responsible for making progress on those most critical. But what was even better is, one, the executives decided it among themselves. We didn't. And then number 2, yeah. And then number 2, they sent emails out to their directs and said, hey, you know, X recruiter is going to be working on a special project over the next 2 weeks. If you find a candidate, fantastic, she'll get it processed. But, you know, here's going to be the times that she's going to be available to do it. I mean, we're just like, we got off the phone and I called the recruiter. I said, okay, what the hell just happened? You know, I said, did they just decide that they're going to leave us, you know, like 3/4 of the organization is going to leave us alone so we can focus on this project? She goes, I think so. But we were able to do it. I mean, out of the 10 open jobs, I think she got 7 of them either filled or like very, very close to the offer stage. And these were very highly technical, high-powered roles, but she was able to zero in and focus on it. It's just unreal. It really is unreal. And now that I'm back in the traditional kind of recruiting environment, I am just itching to get it's like I want my balance back. I want my metrics back. So it's kind of a nice little reminder of what life used to be before Sprint kind of made things nice and balanced.
I do have a question. Like, after the 2 weeks is done, like, what is the in between until the next sprint?
Oh, we run so let's say next Monday starts the sprint. The following Friday ends the sprint, and then you pick back up. So every 2 weeks they get their points back over, and we meet with them usually on a Monday. And it depends. In some organizations, you meet like the day 1 of the sprint. What I prefer is that the last day of the sprint is whenever you are you get your clients on there, because a lot of times you can kind of get that final push of going, hey, we can get an offer out and get it accepted if you get your managers to respond to me. So there's that benefit. But then you can also start your Monday by time blocking. looking at your priority and saying, where are the candidates, in this process? Okay, I'm good on my first 3 priorities, but the 4, I have nothing. This afternoon, I'm going to block off 4 hours. I'm going to do nothing but source for that role.
Okay, awesome. Before I go into my next question, is there anything else that you want to add about sprint recruiting? I'm actually excited to get this to my TA friends.
Yeah, it's, I will tell you, I will never go back to the traditional way of doing it. And even in my first 2 weeks here, I was a little apprehensive about introducing it within the first 10 days that I'm in the new role. But we went through and we trained a group, I think earlier this week. And it's funny because it just, as you go through it, it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, yeah, cool. And so we got immediate buy-in, and the questions and the commentary that went on, it was raw, it was real, but it was still respectful. And all of us now, we're starting our beta with this group for the company next week, and they're like really excited about it. And the recruiters are excited about having the ability to kind of prioritize their time and make progress, because all of us want to be successful.
Oh yeah.
But with all of the noise of traditional recruiting, it's just impossible.
It's like you said earlier, it's like, everything is a fire. So you're like with the hose, like, which way do I point? So next question for you. It's a question I ask everybody. We'll say somebody early on in their career, brand new recruiter, what advice would you give them?
Sit with your line of business. If you're in corporate recruiting, I would say that, and you don't know anything about the business that you're going to be supporting, your natural inclination is to get in there and start getting them candidates. I want to pause on that. Get in there and spend the first 3 days and find out what are the roles that are I call them frequent offenders. What are the ones that you're always going to be filling for that line of business? And then sit down with that line of business, do a day in the life of.
The joys of working from home.
You gotta love it. Gotta love it.
Yeah, sorry, re-ask that question one more time, and I'll have them cut that.
All right, that's fine. All right, so if I'm a new recruiter, let's say I'm supporting a line of business or a group of people that I don't even know what they do. All right.
Yep.
I would invest probably 2 to 3 days in going and sitting and doing the job, or sitting with someone who's doing the job that you're going to be recruiting for. So if it's an underwriter, sit down with the underwriters and look at the systems, ask them questions, watch them walk through a deal. In the new firm, I'd love to go out. Actually, this week I went and spent some time at one of our labs and just kind of walk through the process and talk to the people. Because as a recruiter, the only way that you're going to be successful is if you can truly talk about that job as if you've done it. The goal of a successful recruiter is to let the person on the other phone forget that you're a recruiter. What I cannot stand is hearing a recruiter call a prospect or a potential candidate, I've got a great opportunity for you. Do you know how many things like that? I was out to dinner the other night with a friend of mine, and he's a mortgage broker, and I asked him if he was on LinkedIn, and he goes, yeah, but I'm not really active. And he showed me his inbox, and there were like over 200 messages from recruiters.
I believe that.
Hey, I've got a great opportunity. Hey, I've got a great opportunity. And if you want to stand out, you're going to want to talk like you're from the business and not from recruiting.
That is so accurate, so true. I mean, even my LinkedIn from other recruiters, I'm like, have you guys read my profile?
Right. Yeah, I had a recruiter about 2-3 weeks ago reach out to me and say, hey, I've got a fantastic opportunity for you. Do you have some time to talk? And I always talk to people, because I mean, let's face it, there are a lot of our colleagues who are out of work. So I'll take those calls to be able to maybe connect them with someone that I know that needs a job. But they go down this whole track about what it takes to be a successful recruiter and blah, blah, blah. And, would you be interested in this opportunity? I said, no, I'd be interested to know, did you look at my profile before you picked up the phone? And no, I didn't. I said, okay, I love being a recruiter. I'm still a recruiter. I lead, but I still recruit. Know your audience. And I think this insurance salesman approach of let's just dial for dollars, you're going to be so much more successful. One, if you know what you're recruiting for intimately, and two, if you build strong key relationships with your hiring managers, with your colleagues, and with your candidates, and also too with your centers of influence, so referrals.
Okay. So last question, I'd like to end with this. I will have the link to your book in the podcast notes, so everybody can pick that book up. But what is one of the books that has had the most impact on your recruiting career?
It is Switch by the Heath brothers.
Okay.
I'm a little bit of a fanboy of the Heath brothers. They're easy to read. I read this one 10 years ago. Right at 10 years ago. And there are still pieces that I quote to this day. And what it does is it goes through and it talks about how to lead change.
Okay.
And it talks about the kind of imagine the brain like an elephant rider on an elephant, and where the elephant is your emotion and the rider is your logic, and it kind of walks you through how to lead that change. So I'm not going to spoil the book, but definitely something that you can use in recruiting, you can use in business. I even use it with my daughter whenever I'm parenting. So it's called transformational books.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out, and I'll put the link to that book also in the podcast. So wanted to say thank you so much for joining me on the Elite Recruiter podcast. Anybody internal recruiters, if you want to grow your career as a recruiter, become a recruiting leader, recruiting manager, I think it's one of the things that the data nowadays is so important. Figuring out a solution to help the teams that you're supporting win. Sprint recruiting is actually probably one of the best systems I've actually seen out there. And being a former internal recruiter myself, I know the chaos. I know everything is like a priority. You're always trying to figure out what to do. And then you get those candidates over to the hiring managers in 30, 60 days, you've already lost them by now. I think the sprint recruiting method could be one of the transformational changes that your organization might need. So Trent, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you. I had a blast.